My husband hired a hitman to make me disappear and take all my money. Days later, I faked my death, and he never imagined what I was capable of doing to avenge all his evil. Maria Johnson was leaving the building of her law firm feeling a sense of accomplishment, yet inside she could not mask the growing discomfort she felt. She had won a significant case, one that assured her more prestige and a substantial bonus. Around her, the applause of her colleagues and the backpats seemed to echo emptily. There was a rehearsed smile on her face, but her mind wandered to Roberto, her husband, who in recent months seemed to have turned into a stranger. That night, Maria got home earlier than usual. The residence, an elegant duplex in an exclusive neighborhood, was quiet. The lights were on in the living room, but Roberto was not in his usual chair. His coat was over the back of the sofa, and a half-finished glass of whiskey rested on the glass table. "Roberto?" she called out firmly. From the kitchen came the metallic sound of a key locking the refrigerator door. Roberto appeared, impeccable as always, with his shirt perfectly ironed and his hair slicked back. There was something in his smile that made Maria's stomach knot. "You're home early," Roberto said in a light tone, though his eyes seemed to size her up. "I closed the case sooner than expected. I thought we could have dinner together, like before," she replied, dropping her purse on a chair and unbuckling her heels. Roberto paused briefly, as if weighing the suggestion, then nodded. "Sure, let me order something. I haven't had time to cook." As Roberto reached for his phone, Maria watched him with a mix of affection and something darker. That distant expression he had recently adopted was unsettling. The little lies she had detected in his words and his constant absence had begun to erode the trust that once was the pillar of their marriage. That night, as they ate sushi in front of the TV, Maria tried to break the ice. "How's the club? A lot of people lately?" she asked, feigning disinterest. Roberto, busy with his plate, responded without looking at her. "Fine. People never stop going out. There's always something to celebrate." "I'm glad to hear that. You seem so busy lately. I hardly see you." Roberto glanced up for a moment. A spark of irritation crossed his gaze before he masked it with a smile. "You know how it is. I work hard now so we can relax later." Maria nodded, but her mind was not convinced. Dinner ended in an awkward silence. When Roberto retired to the bedroom, she stayed in the living room with her laptop, supposedly checking emails. Curiosity pushed her to look at Roberto's phone, which he had carelessly left on the table. She knew the password. There was a time when they shared everything without reservation. Maria opened the phone and quickly scrolled through recent messages. One in particular caught her attention, an exchange with someone saved as P. The message read, "All set for tomorrow. Remember, there can be no mistakes." Maria's heart began to beat faster. What were they talking about? The message was cryptic, but there was something in its tone that made her feel vulnerable. Roberto had never been a man with secrets, or so she had believed. She immediately closed the phone when she heard Roberto's footsteps returning. He stopped at the doorway of the living room and looked at her with a neutral expression. "Still working?" he asked in a tone that almost sounded accusatory. "Yes, a couple of things to check," Maria said, closing the laptop hurriedly. Roberto nodded and returned to the bedroom without saying more. She remained seated on the sofa, feeling the facade of their marriage beginning to crack. The sensation of being watched invaded her, as if every move she made was being recorded. The tension grew days later, when Maria and Roberto attended a dinner with close friends. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Roberto was charming, attentive, and talkative. Everyone at the table admired how well they complemented each other as a couple. But Maria did not miss the way Roberto avoided any prolonged eye contact with her. During dinner, Laura, Maria's best friend, noticed something was off. She took a moment alone in the bathroom to ask, "Maria, is everything all right? You seem a bit distant tonight." Maria hesitated before responding, struggling to keep her voice neutral. "Sure, just tired from work." Laura stared at her intently, as if she could see through her facade. "You know you can tell me anything. I've always been here for you." "I know, Laura." "Thank you," Maria replied, forcing a smile before returning to the table. When the dinner ended, Roberto insisted on staying a few minutes longer to talk with one of the men in the group while Maria waited in the car. From the passenger seat, she watched Roberto speaking in a tone that seemed more serious than usual. The man he was talking to handed him an envelope, which Roberto quickly slipped into the inner pocket of his jacket. On the way home, Maria tried to contain her anxiety, but she couldn't help asking, "What were you and that man talking about?" Roberto kept his eyes on the road as he calmly replied, "Club business. Nothing that concerns you." The coldness in his response hit Maria like a bucket of ice water. For the first time in years, she felt completely alone next to the man with whom she had built her life. That night, while Roberto slept soundly, Maria stayed up in the living room, holding a glass of wine and gazing out at the city through the window. Her thoughts swirled. What was going on with Roberto? What did those messages mean? The sense of danger was undeniable, but she had no concrete evidence, only her intuition, and that wasn't enough to act. The sound of Roberto's phone vibrating on the table snapped her out of her thoughts. This time, she didn't hesitate. She checked the screen and saw a message from P. Tomorrow is the day. Don't fail. Fear and confusion washed over her. She decided not to confront him, not yet. She needed to learn more before jumping to conclusions. But deep inside, a dark truth was beginning to surface. Roberto was not the man she thought she knew. At that moment, as the city carried on with its nightly routine, Maria made a decision to protect herself, even though she didn't yet know how. The man sleeping in the next room was no longer her husband. He was an enigma, and every step she took from now on would be marked by a danger she was only just beginning to glimpse. The insistent sound of the alarm filled the room, but Maria was already awake. She had spent the night awake, unable to distance herself from the thoughts invading her mind. Each time she closed her eyes, the words of the message from P echoed like a haunting echo. Tomorrow is the day. Do not fail. She looked at Roberto, who was sleeping peacefully beside her. The calm on his face contrasted with the storm she felt inside. The trust she once had in him crumbled more with each passing moment. Maria knew she had to act, but she also knew that a misstep could cost her everything, even her life. Upon arriving at the office, Maria tried to concentrate on her cases. Her assistant, Elena, noticed her distraction and made a casual comment. "Looks like you didn't sleep well. Is everything all right at home?" "Just a bit of work stress, nothing out of the ordinary," Maria replied, trying to maintain her unconcerned tone. Elena nodded and left the office, but her words left Maria with a bitter feeling. Was it so obvious that something was wrong? Could Roberto notice that she was becoming more distant? After reviewing documents for hours without really paying attention to them, Maria made a decision. She hired a private investigator. Her reputation as a lawyer had connected her with trustworthy people in various areas, and the man she chose, Martin Ramos, was known for his discretion. When she called him, her voice trembled slightly. "I need your help. It's delicate, and I don't want anyone to find out. Can you meet me today?" "Of course, Mrs. Johnson. Tell me where and when." That same evening, Maria met Martin in a discreet cafe. Although she was covered with a scarf and dark glasses, she feared being recognized. Martin was a man of few words, but his presence inspired confidence. "What do you need me to investigate?" he asked as he took out a small notebook to take notes. Maria hesitated before responding. Saying it out loud made everything feel more real. "It's my husband. I think he's planning something against me. He's been acting strange, receiving suspicious messages. I need to know who he's meeting with and what he's doing when he's not at home." Martin looked at her seriously, noting down every detail. "I'll do my best to get answers. But you need to be prepared for what might come out of this. Sometimes the truth is darker than we expect." Maria felt a chill run down her spine. Days later, Martin delivered his first report to her. Maria received it in the office, locking the door before opening the envelope. Inside were photographs of Roberto meeting with a robust man with scars on his face. The images showed them both talking animatedly in an alley behind the nightclub that Roberto managed. There was something unsettling about the man's posture, in the way he shook Roberto's hand, as if they were sealing a deal. Along with the photos, Martin included information about the man, Paco Ruiz, a former member of a gang known for extortions and disappearances. Maria's heart sank as she read his name. Paco had a history that included charges of kidnapping, though he had never been convicted. The connection between him and Roberto was alarming. Maria called Martin immediately. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Why would my husband be meeting with someone like him?" "I don't know yet, but there's something else you need to know," Martin replied cautiously. "I've intercepted another conversation between them. They talked about the plan. They didn't mention specific details, but it's clear they're organizing something. And it doesn't sound legal." Maria's blood ran cold at those words. For years, she had dealt with criminals in her work, but she never imagined that something like this could reach her own home. The image of Roberto as the kind and reliable man she had married was completely crumbling. That night, Maria tried to confront Roberto. She could no longer hide her discomfort. During dinner, she watched him closely, looking for any sign of guilt. Roberto, noticing her inquisitive gaze, raised an eyebrow and smiled. "What's up? You're very quiet today." Maria decided to test the waters. "I'm worried that you're working too much at the club. I don't want you to get into trouble with dangerous people." Roberto put down his fork and looked at her intently. For a moment, his expression seemed to harden before softening again. "Why would you say that? Have you heard something?" he asked, sounding more defensive than he probably intended. "No, nothing. I just want you to be okay. You know I'm always here for you." The smile that Roberto returned to her was superficial, almost forced. The conversation quickly changed topics, but Maria knew something in him had changed. Maybe he suspected she was finding things out. The controversy came the following day when Maria received an unexpected call from Martin. The tone in the investigator's voice was urgent. "We have a problem. It seems Roberto is suspecting something. Paco was seen talking with one of my men. I'm sure it wasn't by chance." Maria felt the ground crumbling under her feet. "What does that mean? Am I in danger?" "I'm not sure. But if Roberto knows you're investigating him, he might accelerate his plan. You need to be very careful. And, Maria, I think you should consider involving the police." The advice echoed in her mind for hours. As the days passed, the tension in her home became unbearable. Roberto became more attentive, almost as if trying to distract her. He brought her flowers, invited her to romantic dinners, but Maria knew it was all a facade. Behind that kindness, there was something dark, something she needed to unmask before it was too late. That night, as Maria reviewed Martin's documents again, she found a detail she had overlooked before. Roberto had made substantial transfers to an anonymous account weeks earlier. The dates coincided with his meetings with Paco. Maria felt time running out. Her life, her future, everything was at stake, and the man she shared her bed with could be her biggest threat. The storm that had started with messages and clandestine meetings was about to explode. Maria knew that the betrayal was not only real, but it could be deadly. The dawn brought a crucial decision for Maria. The previous night, after hours of deliberation, she had reached a conclusion. She could no longer continue alone. The danger was imminent, and her survival instincts had finally pushed her to cross a line she never thought she would have to cross. That morning, with a mixture of fear and determination, she headed to the police department. At the station, Detective Daniel Gomez, a seasoned investigator, was known for his patience and ability to handle complex cases. When Maria entered his office, he greeted her with a look that combined respect and curiosity. He knew who she was, her name was well known in legal circles, and he couldn't ignore the tension radiating from her. "Mrs. Johnson, how can I help you?" Gomez asked, motioning to the chair across from his desk. Maria took a deep breath before responding. Every word she was about to say brought her closer to the truth, but also to danger. "I think my husband is planning to kill me," she blurted out, without embellishment. The silence that followed was oppressive. Gomez stared at her, evaluating her words and expression. "Do you have proof of what you're saying?" he asked in a calm yet firm tone. Maria opened her bag and placed Martine's report, the photographs, and the messages she had found on Roberto's phone on the desk. Gomez took his time reviewing the documents, nodding slightly as he read. This is serious. If what you're saying is true, we need to act carefully. One false move, and we could tip him off. Are you willing to work with us? Gomez asked, looking Maria directly in the eye. I'll do whatever it takes to stop him. But I need to make sure he can't get away. If he finds out I know something, I don't know what he might do to me, Maria replied, her voice trembling. The plan began to take shape that same afternoon. Gomez gathered his team, and they discussed possible strategies. The priority was to obtain more concrete evidence that could hold up in court. While the recordings and photographs were a good start, they needed explicit confirmation of Roberto's intentions. For that, they decided to infiltrate an informant into the meetings between him and Paco. Maria watched in silence as the agents discussed the details. The feeling of being at the center of a police operation was surreal, but she knew she had no other choice. Her safety depended on them. What will happen if they discover the informant? Maria asked, unable to hide her concern. That's always a risk, but we're prepared to handle it. Our job is to ensure you're protected at all times, Gomez responded in a reassuring tone. Though the detective's words were meant to offer comfort, Maria couldn't ignore the growing unease inside her. Everything she had believed in for years, her marriage, her life, was crumbling before her eyes. Days later, the police successfully placed the informant, a man named Ernesto, into Paco's inner circle. With his rugged appearance and knack for earning the trust of dangerous men, Ernesto began working as a supposed collaborator in Paco's operations. The first recordings he delivered revealed alarming details. In one captured conversation, Paco and Roberto spoke openly about the plan. Everything is ready. She just needs to trust the routine. She suspects nothing. She's too naive, Roberto said in a cold tone Maria barely recognized as her husband's. Are you sure there won't be any problems? I don't want something to go wrong and blow back on us, Paco replied with a warning tone. Trust me, everything will go as planned. By the time anyone notices, it'll be too late. Maria listened to the recording in Gomez's office, her hands clenched in her lap. Every word was a dagger tearing through the image she had built of Roberto. She felt a mix of fear and fury, but most of all, a deep sadness. This man, the one who had promised her eternal love, now spoke about her life as if it were merely an obstacle to be removed. This is enough to move forward with the operation, Gomez said, turning off the recorder. But I need to warn you, it will be dangerous. Are you sure you want to proceed? Maria raised her gaze, her eyes filled with determination. There's no turning back. If we don't stop him now, he'll carry out his plan. The controversy arose when the team decided Maria should play an active role in the operation. The idea was to record a conversation between her and Roberto, where, without confronting him directly, she would push him to reveal more details about his plan. Gomez knew it was risky, but it was also the best way to obtain a direct confession. Maria was terrified. The thought of facing Roberto, knowing what he was planning, was overwhelming. But her fear turned to anger as she recalled the recordings. He saw her as disposable, as an obstacle to be eliminated. She wasn't going to let that happen. That night, when Roberto came home, Maria greeted him with a rehearsed smile. The police had installed a hidden microphone in her necklace, and every word would be transmitted in real time to Gomez's team. I missed you, Roberto. I feel like we've been so distant lately, Maria said as she poured 2 glasses of wine. Roberto seemed puzzled by her demeanor, but settled on the couch and accepted the glass. I've been busy with work. You know how it is, he replied casually. Sometimes I wonder if it's all worth it. So much effort, so many hours apart. I just want us to be okay, like before. Roberto looked at her with a mix of caution and something darker. For a few seconds, the room was filled with silence. We're fine, Maria. You don't have anything to worry about, he finally said, though his tone lacked warmth. Maria felt her heart pounding, but she forced herself to remain composed. I just want you to know I trust you. I always have. No matter what happens, I'm here for you. The words were laden with a double meaning that didn't escape Roberto's notice. Though he didn't respond immediately, his gaze was intense, almost as if he were trying to decipher Maria's true intentions. When they went upstairs to the bedroom, Roberto hugged her tighter than usual. Maria felt a chill run down her spine, but she didn't pull away. She knew every moment was a dangerous game, and the slightest sign of weakness could jeopardize the entire plan. Deep down, Maria knew the worst was yet to come. But she also knew she was ready to face it. Her life no longer belonged solely to her. It was now part of a larger fight, a fight to survive and reclaim her freedom. Hours later, Maria and Gomez's plan was set to begin. The night was dark and silent as Maria met with the police team in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. The beams of flashlights illuminated just enough of the space to reveal the scene. A technical crew was checking cameras, makeup, and recording equipment. Detective Gomez, with a serious expression, reviewed the details of the operation. "This is how we'll do it," said Gomez, pointing to a blueprint on an improvised table. "We need everything to look like a real accident. The key is to capture Roberto's reaction. If he reacts the way we expect, we'll have enough to nail him." Maria, standing next to the table, nodded with her jaw clenched. Every word she heard reminded her of how surreal the situation was. She wasn't just the victim anymore. Now she was a key piece in a trap designed to unmask the man she had once loved. Hours later, the warehouse transformed into a scene of carefully choreographed chaos. Makeup artists worked meticulously to create fake injuries on Maria's body. Her face was covered in cuts and artificial blood, and her hands trembled as she stared at her reflection in a broken mirror. "This is necessary, Maria," said the special effects technician, adjusting the details on her skin. His tone was professional, but his words didn't calm her. Maria took a deep breath and looked away. She didn't want to see herself as a victim, not when she was fighting to stay strong. The plan was simple in theory, but every step was laden with uncertainty. The operation would take place on a little-traveled road near the city. The police would simulate a car accident in which Maria would be the only person involved. A wrecked car, skid marks on the asphalt, and a motionless body, everything had to look convincing. The team moved with precision, setting up hidden cameras around the area. Maria lay on the ground, covered with a sheet, as the technicians checked the final details. Detective Gomez knelt beside her and spoke in a low voice. "You're sure about this, right? We can still stop. There's no other option." "This has to work," Maria replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Gomez nodded and stood up. Maria closed her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. She could hear the sound of cars in the distance and the murmurs of the team at work. Every second felt like an eternity. When everything was ready, Gomez made an anonymous call to the nightclub where Roberto worked. The message was clear. Maria had been in an accident and was in critical condition. Roberto's reaction would be crucial. If he was truly involved in a plot against her, his response would betray him. From a nearby van, the police team monitored the cameras. Maria, still motionless on the ground, wore a hidden microphone to capture any words spoken near her. Gomez watched the screens with a furrowed brow, waiting for Roberto to arrive. When Roberto finally arrived, his car screeched to a halt in the middle of the road. He got out hurriedly, but instead of rushing to the supposed accident, he stopped several feet away, watching. His expression was hard to read. No panic, no genuine concern, just a cold calm. "Is this it?" he muttered to himself, but his voice was picked up by the microphones. The team in the van held their breath. Roberto slowly approached Maria's body, his footsteps echoing in the night. "So, in the end, I didn't even have to lift a finger," he said with a twisted smile. His words sliced through the air like a knife. Then he took out his phone and dialed a number. "Paco, it's done. It didn't go exactly as planned, but this turned out better. Now it's just a matter of time before everything settles down, and we can move forward." In the van, Gomez signaled to the agents. It was enough. The audio and video recordings confirmed what they had suspected all along. Roberto not only showed no remorse, but he seemed to be celebrating. The agents moved quickly, surrounding Roberto before he could react. He tried to resist, but was easily subdued. Maria, still lying on the ground, slowly opened her eyes and sat up with the help of an officer. Her body trembled, not from the cold night air, but from the intensity of the moment. Roberto looked at her in disbelief as the handcuffs were placed on his wrists. This is a trap. You can't do this to me, he shouted, his voice filled with rage. Maria approached slowly, keeping her gaze fixed on him. There were tears in her eyes, but also a strength Roberto had never seen before. You did this to me, Roberto. I just made sure you faced the consequences, she said firmly. Roberto tried to speak, but the agents pushed him toward the police car. His figure disappeared into the darkness, leaving Maria standing beside the fake accident scene. Gomez walked up to her and placed a hand on her shoulder. You did the right thing. This won't be easy, but you're safe now. Maria nodded, though she wasn't sure if those words were true. She had won a battle, but the price she had paid was higher than she could bear at that moment. She looked at the wrecked car and the cameras, wondering if she would ever reclaim the life she had lost. As the operation wrapped up, an officer approached with a phone in hand. Maria, there's something you should hear. It was a voicemail left by Paco. His tone was mocking, almost as if he knew he was being recorded. You think it's over, but this is just the beginning. Roberto wasn't alone, and neither are you. The message left everyone in silence. Gomez frowned and looked at Maria. This isn't over. We'll have to be ready for what's coming. Maria gazed into the distance, sensing that her fight was just beginning. The shadows surrounding Roberto were deeper than she had imagined, and now she knew her life would never be the same. Hours later, the tension in the interrogation room was palpable. Roberto sat on the other side of the table, handcuffed, his eyes fixed on the floor. His expression alternated between restrained anger and cold indifference. Behind the two-way mirror, Maria observed the scene alongside Detective Gomez. Although she knew she was safe, Roberto's presence just a few meters away filled her with a visceral fear she struggled to control. We need him to talk, but it won't be easy, Gomez murmured, crossing his arms as he studied Roberto through the glass. He's smart, and he knows anything he says can and will be used against him. I know him. He'll play the innocent man, the betrayed husband. But we know what he really is, Maria replied, with a firmness that concealed the storm within her. Gomez nodded before stepping into the room, leaving Maria behind the glass. She knew this moment would be decisive, but that didn't make it any easier. Her hands trembled slightly as she clenched her fists, trying to steady the torrent of emotions threatening to overwhelm her. Inside the room, Gomez placed a recorder on the table and sat across from Roberto. So, Roberto, care to explain why you were celebrating your wife's death instead of worrying about her? Roberto slowly lifted his gaze, a smile flickering across his face that didn't reach his eyes. I have no idea what you're talking about. I got a call saying she'd had an accident. I arrived at the scene, and to my surprise, it was all a staged spectacle. You should be interrogating her, not me. We have evidence, Roberto. Recordings, messages, bank transfers. Everything points to you planning to eliminate Maria. And you weren't working alone. We want the names of your accomplices. Roberto leaned forward, his voice low and laced with venom. Circumstantial evidence. Nothing a good lawyer can't dismantle. As for my accomplices, I have no idea what you're talking about. Maybe you should look at the people Maria trusts. Maybe she's not as innocent as she wants you to believe. Gomez kept his composure, but Maria, behind the glass, felt her heart pounding. Roberto's manipulation was calculated, and his ability to twist the narrative was terrifying. For a brief moment, she remembered why she had fallen for him, his charisma, his confidence. Now, those same qualities made him so dangerous. Later, in a separate room, Maria sat across from Gomez and the investigative team. On the table lay a detailed report containing Roberto's recordings and financial history. Every page was a painful reminder of how she had lived with a man who had betrayed her in the deepest ways. Paco is our top priority now. We know he was involved in the plan, but that voicemail he left suggests there are more people involved. This might be bigger than we thought, Gomez said, pointing to the notes in the report. What does that mean for me? Isn't catching Roberto enough? Maria asked, her voice heavy with exhaustion. Roberto is just one piece. If Paco has other allies, they might try something against you. We need to ensure your safety while we continue investigating. Maria nodded, though the thought of living under constant surveillance made her feel even more trapped. She had dreamed of the moment Roberto would be arrested, thinking it would be the end of her nightmare. But now she realized it was only the beginning. That night, in the solitude of a safe house provided by the police, Maria tried to process everything that was happening. The walls were cold and devoid of any decoration, a stark contrast to the home she had shared with Roberto. She sat on the edge of the bed, holding her phone in her hands. She decided to call Laura, her best friend. She needed a human connection, someone who wasn't tied to the police operation or the horrors surrounding her. Laura, it's me, she said, her voice trembling slightly. Maria, I've been so worried. I haven't heard from you since everything hit the news. Are you okay? I don't know. Everything feels so unreal. Roberto is in custody, but there's still so much I don't understand. Everything I thought I knew about my life, about him, has fallen apart. Laura paused before replying, her tone filled with concern. I want to be with you, Maria. Tell me where you are, and I'll come see you. I can't. I'm in a safe location. The police say I might still be in danger. In danger? What else could happen? Laura asked, her voice rising slightly. I don't know. Roberto wasn't working alone. There are others involved, and I have no idea who they are or what they're capable of. Laura was silent, and when she finally spoke, her voice was firm. You're stronger than you think, Maria. You've survived all of this. And you're not alone. Don't let him or anyone else make you feel otherwise. Laura's words offered momentary comfort, but the sense of looming threat didn't dissipate. She ended the call and lay back on the bed, squeezing her eyes shut. Though she was surrounded by secure walls, she felt more vulnerable than ever. The next day brought an unexpected twist. Gomez called Maria back to the station to show her a new recording. Ernesto, the informant who had infiltrated Paco's circle, had captured a critical conversation. They're trying to finish what Roberto couldn't. They want to silence her for good before she can testify, Gomez explained, his tone graver than usual. Why? They already have Roberto. What more do they want? Maria asked, her voice laced with disbelief. This isn't just about you. It seems there are other operations at stake, and your testimony could expose them. To them, you're a problem that needs to disappear. Gomez's words hit Maria like a cold wind. She wasn't just up against Roberto, but an entire network of people willing to do anything to protect their interests. Fear and anger swirled within her, but instead of paralyzing her, it ignited something deeper, a fierce determination to survive and bring all of them to justice. We'll do whatever it takes to protect you. But this means things might get even more dangerous before they get better, Gomez said, looking her directly in the eye. I don't care what it takes. I won't let them silence me. They played their game with me, but now I'll play mine, Maria replied, her voice filled with an intensity that even surprised the detective. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. The rain pounded heavily against the windows of the police station. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Maria sat in a conference room, surrounded by a team of officers going over the details of the next phase of the operation. The message intercepted by Ernesto had changed everything. This was no longer just about incriminating Roberto. It was about dismantling the entire network behind him. Detective Gomez rose from his chair and paced the room with purposeful strides. His eyes rested on Maria, who stared back at him, searching for some reassurance that this nightmare would soon be over. Maria, here's what we're going to do, Gomez said in a grave tone. Ernesto has given us critical intel about a meeting between Paco and his allies. It's happening at a warehouse on the outskirts of the city. We believe they're planning how to eliminate you and ensure Roberto doesn't talk. Maria swallowed hard. Every time she heard the word eliminate, something inside her broke a little more. But she couldn't show weakness, not now, not when she was so close to facing those who had tried to destroy her. "What do you need me to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety coursing through her. Gomez shook his head. "I don't want you anywhere near that meeting. It's too dangerous." "This isn't just about you," Maria countered, standing up from her chair. "This is my problem. I'm not going to sit back while others risk their lives for something I started." The room fell silent. Gomez looked at her with a mix of admiration and concern. He knew arguing with her was pointless. "Fine, but this isn't negotiable. You'll be under direct protection. If anything goes wrong, your safety will be our priority." That night, the team prepared for the operation. In a camouflaged vehicle, Maria and Gomez waited at a safe distance from the warehouse. From their vantage point, they could see the flickering lights and figures moving in and out of the building. Ernesto was already inside, equipped with a hidden microphone transmitting everything in real time. "They're here." Paco's with two others, Ernesto reported over the radio. His voice was calm, but Maria knew every word carried immense risk. From the vehicle, Maria listened intently to the conversation. Paco's voice was as cold as she had imagined. "We can't take any chances. She's already made too much noise. If she testifies, it's not just us she'll take down, it's everyone else. We need to end this, and fast." One of the men responded, his voice rough and distrustful. "And what if the cops already know too much?" "It might not be as simple as you think. That's why we have a plan," Paco replied. "The men are ready. It's just a matter of waiting for the right moment." Maria felt her chest tighten. They were talking about her as if she were an object, an obstacle to be removed for their convenience. Anger boiled inside her, but she couldn't let it control her. She needed to think clearly. Gomez signaled his team to move. Several police vehicles surrounded the warehouse, blocking all exits. Inside, Ernesto maintained his cover, feigning shock as officers burst in, weapons drawn. "Police!" Everyone on the ground, one of the officers shouted as the tension inside erupted. Paco and his men tried to resist. One of them fired at the officers, triggering a gunfight that echoed throughout the building. From the vehicle, Maria could hear the shots, her heart racing wildly. Gomez, sitting next to her, monitored the operation through his radio. "We have two in custody." "Paco's resisting, but he won't get far," one of the officers reported. The standoff continued for several minutes before the police subdued Paco and the other men. When it was over, silence fell over the space, broken only by the clinking of handcuffs and the officers' commands. Paco was taken to the station and placed in a cell separate from Roberto's. Still processing the intensity of the operation, Maria decided she needed to see him. Gomez tried to dissuade her, but she insisted. She had to face him, look him in the eye, and understand the kind of monster who had conspired against her life. When Maria entered the interrogation room, Paco greeted her with a mocking smile. There was no remorse in his expression, only disdain. "So, the little princess thinks she's tough now," Paco sneered. "You think just because you got Roberto and me, it's over? You have no idea what you've started." "I know exactly what I've started," Maria replied, her voice firm. "And I know you and your allies will pay for everything you've done." "Allies?" Paco scoffed. "You think it's just me and Roberto? There are people far bigger than us, people who won't hesitate to destroy you if you keep sticking your nose where it doesn't belong." Maria stared at him, letting his words sink in. She wouldn't let him intimidate her. "Then they'll fall too. Because I'm not stopping until this is finished," she said, rising from her chair and walking out. That night, as Maria returned to her safe house, the feeling of danger lingered. She knew she had won an important battle, but Paco's words echoed in her mind. This wasn't over. There were more players involved, more secrets to uncover. And though the path ahead was terrifying, she was determined to face it. She looked out the window, watching the distant city lights. She was more alone than ever, but her resolve had never been stronger. This wasn't just for her. It was for everyone who had been silenced, for those who had never had the chance to fight. And she knew she wouldn't stop until the truth was brought to light. The glow of the monitors illuminated the small room where the investigation team reviewed the latest recordings obtained after Paco's arrest. The audios revealed names, addresses, and fragments of conversations that uncovered a network far larger than anyone had anticipated. Every word made it clear that the web of corruption and organized crime didn't end with Roberto and Paco. There was something deeper, a structure designed to operate in the shadows. Maria sat next to Gomez, feeling the weight of each revelation. At times, anger and fear threatened to overwhelm her, but she knew there was no turning back. We have new names. Some of them are tied to businesses and government contracts. This isn't just a murder attempt, Maria. This could be the beginning of something much bigger, Gomez said, pointing to the screen. What do we do now? Maria asked, her voice controlled but tinged with urgency. First, we need to protect you. You're a target, not just because you were the initial objective, but because now they know you have enough information to destroy them. Maria nodded, though the constant sense of danger no longer felt unfamiliar to her. She looked at the screen, where one name in particular stood out, David Velasco. The image of the man, with his neat face and polished demeanor, struck her like lightning. Velasco wasn't just an influential businessman with political connections, he was also her stepfather. The air seemed heavier as Maria processed the discovery. Her relationship with Velasco had always been distant, marked by his cold and controlling behavior, but she had never imagined he could be involved in something like this. Velasco can't be involved, she murmured, more to herself than to Gomez. You know him? Gomez asked, noting the shift in her expression. Maria nodded slowly. He's my stepfather. He was married to my mother for years. He's always been reserved, controlling, but I never thought he could do something like this. The silence that followed was tense. Gomez looked at her seriously, considering what she had just revealed. This complicates things. If Velasco is involved, it means this is personal. We need to act quickly before he can cover his tracks. The urgency of the situation pushed the team to intercept Velasco's communications. What they heard confirmed their worst fears. In one of the intercepted calls, Velasco was speaking with someone whose voice Maria immediately recognized, her mother. Things are getting complicated. Maria's too involved. We can't let this come to light, or it'll destroy all of us, Velasco said in an authoritative tone. I warned you, David. I told you we needed to act earlier. But you hesitated, and now everything is out of control, her mother replied with a coldness that sent chills through Maria. Maria felt as though the ground beneath her was crumbling. Her own mother, the woman who was supposed to protect her, was conspiring with Velasco in a plan to destroy her. This can't be, she murmured, her hands trembling as she listened to the rest of the conversation. We can still fix this, Velasco continued. If we make her disappear before she testifies, everything will settle down. Roberto is already out of the game. She's the only obstacle now. Maria turned away from the screen, unable to listen any further. Gomez looked at her with concern, placing a hand on her shoulder. I know this is a lot, but we need you to stay strong. What we just heard is enough to incriminate them both. We can act, but it'll be risky. My mother? Maria whispered, her voice barely audible. All this time, she knew she was with them. We'll stop them. This isn't just about them. This is for everything you've been through. We won't let them get away with it. That night, the team organized a raid on Velasco's mansion, where they believed incriminating documents were still hidden. The operation was fraught with tension, not only because of the magnitude of the case, but also because of its personal implications for Maria. She sat in a nearby van, watching everything unfold in real time through the cameras. When the agents stormed the property, they found Velasco and her mother in the middle of a heated argument. Documents were spread across a table, evidence of contracts, transfers, and a network of illegal activities. This is a mistake. You have nothing on me. Velasco shouted as the agents handcuffed him. And what will you do with her? Arrest a mother for protecting her daughter? Her mother said bitterly, gesturing at the police. From the van, Maria watched the scene with a broken heart. Gomez approached and asked if she wanted to go in, but she shook her head. I can't see her now. I can't face her. Hours later, at the station, Velasco and her mother were placed in separate cells. Maria, though emotionally drained, decided to confront her mother. She walked slowly to the interrogation room, where her mother sat with her hands cuffed and a weary look in her eyes. "Why?" Maria asked, her voice trembling. Her mother looked up, her eyes showing a mix of sadness and coldness. "I did what I had to do. Velasco promised we'd be safe, that you'd be safe. I never thought it would go this far." "Safe? You wanted to destroy me." Maria shouted, her words filled with anger. "You don't understand. You can't understand. Everything I did was for us. But you became a problem, Maria. You left us no choice." Maria felt tears streaming down her face, but she couldn't stop them. She looked at her mother one last time before leaving the room, leaving behind a silence that seemed endless. That night, as the team reviewed the seized documents, Gomez approached Maria and handed her a cup of coffee. "You took an important step today. This won't be easy, but we're closer to ending this." Maria nodded, though the words of comfort barely touched her pain. She had lost her mother, not just physically but emotionally. The enemy wasn't just in the shadows, it had been in her own home. But she knew she couldn't stop now. Not yet. The fight was far from over, and she wouldn't let herself fall. Days later, the day of the trial had arrived. The courtroom was packed. Tension hung in the air as whispers filled the room around Maria, seated next to the prosecutors. This was the moment, the time to face Roberto, Paco, Velasco, and, most painfully, her own mother. The mountain of evidence compiled by the police, from recordings to confiscated documents, had turned this case into a national spectacle. Maria, her hands clasped tightly, watched as the judge took his seat. Across from her sat the defendants, each with a different expression. Roberto avoided her gaze, Paco wore a mocking smile, and Velasco maintained a facade of calm. Her mother, however, looked like a shadow of her former self, her eyes empty and her head bowed. The lead prosecutor opened the case with strength, presenting a detailed summary of the crimes: conspiracy to commit murder, corruption, money laundering, and contract manipulation. Every word struck Maria like a hammer to her heart, but she remained composed. This was her moment to take back control of her life. During the trial, the recordings of Roberto and Paco were played in court. Their voices, meticulously plotting how to eliminate Maria, echoed through the room. Roberto kept his eyes downcast, while Paco seemed to revel in the attention. Next came the evidence linking Velasco to the corruption network. Bank transfers and illicit contracts spoke volumes. When it was her mother's turn, Maria felt the air grow heavier. The prosecutor presented phone conversations that incriminated her, showing how she had actively collaborated with Velasco. Her mother did not deny anything. When the judge gave her a chance to speak, she looked up at Maria, but her words sought no forgiveness. "I made mistakes, but they came from desperation. I never wanted it to end this way. There is no justification for what I did, but I hope that one day you can understand." Maria did not respond. Her mother's words, though laden with regret, could not erase the pain she had caused. After weeks of hearings, the day of sentencing arrived. The judge, speaking in a solemn tone, began reading the sentences. Roberto Sosa, for conspiracy to commit murder and money laundering, is sentenced to 20 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Roberto barely reacted, his face hardened by defeat. Francisco Paco Ruiz, for conspiracy and participation in organized criminal activities, is sentenced to 25 years in prison, with parole eligibility after 15 years. Paco simply shrugged, as if the weight of the sentence didn't matter to him. David Velasco, for corruption, conspiracy to commit murder, and manipulation of government contracts, is sentenced to 30 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Velasco maintained his composure, but the tension in his jaw betrayed his simmering anger. The judge paused before reading the final sentence. Claudia Mendoza, for conspiracy to commit murder and aiding in the cover-up, is sentenced to 10 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after serving half her sentence. Maria felt a mix of relief and sadness. She knew her mother would no longer be part of her life, but she also knew she had done the right thing by testifying against her. When it was all over, Maria exited the courthouse surrounded by journalists and cameras. Questions rained down from every direction, but she said nothing. She walked silently to the car waiting for her, accompanied by Gomez, who had become an invaluable source of support throughout the process. "How do you feel?" Gomez asked as they got into the vehicle. "Relieved, I guess. But also exhausted. This isn't just about justice. It's about losing everything I once believed I had," Maria replied, staring out the window. "What you've done is brave, not just for you, but for everyone who has ever been through something like this. This network will never harm anyone again." Maria nodded. Gomez's words were true, but the emptiness she felt wasn't so easily filled. She had won, but the cost had been high. Months later, Maria had begun to rebuild her life. She left her job as a patent lawyer behind and started a foundation to help victims of conspiracies and abuses. Her experience had transformed her into a resilient and outspoken advocate, a woman determined to make a difference. One day, while organizing a charity event, she received a letter from prison. It was from her mother. Maria held the envelope in her hands for several minutes before opening it. The contents were brief but deeply emotional. "Maria, I know I have no right to ask for anything, but I want you to know that I am sorry. I don't expect your forgiveness. I only want you to live a full life, something I never knew how to do. I love you, even if I don't deserve it. Mom." Maria closed the letter and placed it in a drawer. She didn't know if she was ready to forgive her, but she also knew that holding on to hate would get her nowhere. Something inside her began to heal. That night, as Maria looked out at the city lights from her apartment window, she felt a peace she hadn't experienced in months. She knew the fight was over. Her life would never be the same, but she was ready to build something new, something better. And in that moment, for the first time, she believed she could. If you enjoyed this story, I invite you to share in the comments how you felt while listening to it. If you've been through a similar situation of betrayal, I'd love to hear your valuable opinion. I'd be honored if you left a like, shared this video with a friend or family member, and subscribed to the channel. Don't miss the next amazing story that's popping up on your screen right now. We've got guaranteed entertainment exclusively for you. See you in the next video.